that could potentially give you an hour of reading, but it would sound like it would be but it was a long time for them to do what they might. So I'm thinking about that. I don't know, but I think using it for the long
Friends, again, we want to thank you so much for being a part of this evening. And as we wrap up eating, I want to invite Ms. Rhonda to come and speak to us and share about child advocacy. So thank you. Let's give her a round.
Yeah, well, Monday, I wanted to call myself, help her. Marching
Okay, can y'all hear this? Can y'all hear this? No, I cannot. So I guess you need to turn me up.
Why are you up?
I'm standing up, but y'all can't hear me. Sounds like you can. You hear me now? Okay, so this is not an easy topic for most people. It's something that I've dealt with for actually for 30 years. I've been a Kids First for 25 years. So for most people, you know, you hear about like the SPCA. When you hear about puppy dogs and kitty cats, guess what happens? The endorphins in your body start flowing. That's happy stuff. And literally, physiologically, that's happy when we start talking about dogs and cats. When we start talking about children and child abuse, especially child sexual abuse, which I'll be talking about tonight, guess what happens? There's another kind of chemical called cortisol that starts flowing in your body. And that's not a good chemical. That's a stress chemical. And let me shut that down and go in another direction, and let's not talk about this. Let's not think about this anymore. So it takes courage to listen and to face and to deal with this issue that certainly happens in our community. Like I say, I've been with Kids First for 25 years, and what Kids First is, most everybody that I speak to, I just talked to a nursing class on Monday, over 30 people were in that class, and nobody, and they all were in Elizabeth City, not one of them knew what Kids First was or did. And I know some of you in here do know, but perhaps you don't know really what all we do. So I want to briefly go over that. Before 1985, every single victim had to go through these troughs of different service agencies dealt with each case. And if you can think about, and I'm going to give you a case out of Currituck County, a 5-year-old child who was sold to a massage parlor on a weekly basis to somebody in Virginia. Okay? That child, before the MDT, would have to have gone through multiple interviews, would probably have shut down after the third interview. But because there was a CAC, she didn't have to. So the Child Advocacy Center model is centered around a multidisciplinary team. So everybody is on one team. Everybody who's involved with a case. So that's law enforcement, DSS, medical, therapists, child advocacy, the DA's office. We're all around one table. That makes a huge, huge difference in that child's life. We also, we do interviews for SBI, I have agreements with SBI, FBI, and NCIS. In fact, we just did an interview for NCIS 2 weeks ago. So a lot happens at the CAC. multidisciplinary team approach, instead of everybody being in their own little silo, trying to deal with a case and they're not talking to each other, this is what happens. The eyeball is on the child, bottom line. And that's how each case is dealt with. Focus is on that child. And that makes outcomes 1,000 times better. You know, people ask us all the time who work with Kids First, how do you deal with this all the time? You talk about, you know, trafficking, and you talk about a kid who's been sold, all this stuff. How do you deal with that? We deal with it because we use evidence-based therapy. And we see the outcomes. And those outcomes are positive. Really, really positive. I had somebody in, and I've told this 1,000 times, I guess, but, you know, we have people come to us all the time talking about, as adults, who were served at Kids First, about how successful their lives are. I had somebody come up to me in Cypress Creek one day, and I had my name tag on, and after we were served, after we were all done, she came up to me and she said, "Can I tell you something?" She said, "You work with Kids First." I said, "Certainly." And there were some state representatives there with me. And she said, "I just want you to know, when I was a little girl, all I ever wanted was to grow up and have a family and, you know, have children and get married and all that." She said, "My uncle sexually abused me." And she said, "I thought that was the end of the world. And that was the end of my dreams." She said, "But I went to Kids First and I saw Miss Ida for treatment." She said, "I just want you to know that I'm happily married and I have 2 beautiful children." Come on. Yeah. That's what it's about. And because we're there, and because we face it, and because you all are willing to look at it and face it and help us be there, we can provide these services. So Kids First provides services at no charge to 7 counties, the whole first judicial district. No charge. We have more evidence-based therapies than any other child advocacy center in the state, and there are 55. We have evidence-based. We have medical evaluation on site. We have, of course, prevention services and advocacy. We have nationally certified advocacy services. We're a nationally accredited center. So it's just a whole good bunch of services in one place, and it's child-friendly. So I want to ask y'all, yeah, you can go ahead and go through those. Blip. I didn't mean to do all this. That's an old slide that I did. Okay. Now you can stop there. So what was I going to say next?
You were going to ask a question.
Oh, yes. Okay. Question I'm going to ask you. If you know the answer to this, if you asked it in a different club, please do not answer. How many kids do you think we serve who are Medicaid eligible?
What time period?
I'm sorry?
What time period?
In a year. In a year's time.
120.
No. What percentage of the children, we serve over about 250 new cases a year.
Okay.
Okay, about 250 new children. Now, those children, some of those are going to be going through to the next year. They don't get counted in the next year. I'm talking about 250 new cases every year.
Mm-hmm.
What percentage do you think are Medicaid kids, poor kids, Medicaid eligible kids?
I would say all of them.
65%.
20%.
20%.
Less than 5%.
Really?
They're middle class, lower to upper middle class kids. What percentage of them do you think are white?
Lower than
90%. 90%. Yeah. So a whole lot of myths out there about sexually abused kids and who does it and who the victims are and who the perpetrators are. So now you can go again. How many children? Too many children are abused. 1 in 4 girls, 1 in 6 boys are sexually abused by the time they're 18 years old.
That's a national average?
Oh, yes. Yeah. Median age is 9, we see, and that's about right. Majority of our kids are, 8 to 10. So we see that too. More than 20% are under 8 years old. I mean, I'm sorry, but we've seen kids that, I'm not even gonna go into details.
Is this just US?
This is the United States.
Just
yes.
US.
Just as the United States. Way too many, again. Less than 10% of those. So if we serve 250, less than 10% of those children tell. Less than 10%. Over 30% never tell in their lifetimes. I will never forget as long as I live. I was working at Hopeline, and I was working with a woman who was escaping domestic violence, and she was an elderly woman. And she told me about having been sexually abused as a child. First time it ever crossed her lips. I'll never forget that. People hold it in, hold it in, hold it in. That many people never tell.
They're ashamed and they have no reason to be ashamed.
Right. That's exactly right. And that's part of what I'm going to get into next, so you can go right on. Ruth, sorry, it's a dragon. Ruth hates dragons. She hates dragons. I think you can hit that again, because I think it'll do something. Dr. Brown always called these dragons. Perpetrators were like, it's a dragon. They're like mythical. You can't really see where they are. And you don't really know how to identify them, but part of prevention is knowing how to identify them. Who are these people? Oh, okay, he's coming to get me. And this is very true. It will not do to leave a dragon out of your plans if you live near one. Well, guess what? All of you and I live near a dragon. We all live near a sexual abuser. All of us do. I promise.
Yeah.
I promise. If 10% are all the disclosures we get, if that's all the truth from children that they tell about their abuse, that means that 90% of those perpetrators are out there continuing, and they're out there and they do what they do as if they have gotten their master's degree at the same university in how to do this. And it's called grooming. And it's so manipulative. In fact, in court, we don't call it grooming anymore. We just call it manipulation.
What is it called?
Grooming.
Oh, okay.
Or manipulation is what it is.
Right.
And dragons do come in those two flavors. One is the groomers, and the other is grabbers. Now, it used to be you talk about, all these, what do we call it even? Well, no, snatching, snatch and run, kind of whatever. And so it's like stranger danger.
Right.
It's all about stranger danger. Well, folks, it's not stranger danger. There's some of that. A very, very, very little bit of that. And they are, yes, aggressive and more violent and aggressive and all of that, but the majority are groomers. They're people that you and I would judge to be normal, everyday folks. They look just like we do. Okay. Now, what kind of person would sexually abuse a child? If you want to know what makes a player a pro, ask him one more. The Socially Skilled Child Molester. That was written by Carl Van Dam, and this is a very interesting thing. I have watched some of these interviews with perpetrators. She did thousands of interviews with child molesters. They had clemency. They were convicted, but they had clemency, so they were free to tell exactly what they did. Unmasked. They were boasting. They were sharing their trade secrets, and it was disgusting. And really and truly, what they did, the first thing they do, they will take a year sometimes longer, to court, to groom, first of all, the family. It may be a church family. It may be a church group. They will groom those adults that will then give them access to the children. So here we are. You know, I'm doing all these favors for these parents. You know. I'm offering, oh, why don't y'all have a night out? Y'all need a night out. Let me stay with the kids. Now, that night that he's with the kids, he's not going to do anything that night. Not likely. He's going to start the grooming with the kids, building the trust there too. And it's gradual. It is just a gradual manipulation, getting closer and closer. And they're a normal appearing, really nice behaviors, almost too nice sometimes. They become best buddies sometimes with the kids. If the kids grow out of the house, you know, grow up and get to be too old, all of a sudden they break the relationship with the family because they don't have kids anymore. This is just how it works. And what they'll do with the children is get to a place with the kids where if the child, even though they know something's not quite right, what they'll do is then they'll say, well, you can't tell anybody because nobody's going to believe you. And they know that their parents trust this person. I mean, it may be a mom. This may be a stepfather. It may be a grandmother. Sorry, but we've had grandmothers who sexually abuse children. I mean, there's nothing sacred, but that's a fact. Women do sexually abuse children, both female and male. Okay. You know groomers. You know them. Tell me that there is not, and this is really, really short. I could go into all kinds of the whole, every characteristic, everything that they do. And you would say, oh my Lord. Ooh, I know somebody that acted like that. I know somebody that gives me that ick feeling in my gut, and I just wasn't sure. But they made me feel really icky. Anytime you feel that about anybody, you trust your gut. And that's what you tell children to do. And any kids that you have, when adult children that you have, tell them, if you're taking care of their kids, I'll never forget this, I used to do this with Cameron. I tell Cameron when I was babysitting her children, that's my niece. When I was babysitting my great nieces, I would tell my niece Cameron, I want you to stop by. I want you to practice this. I want you to just stop by on me every now and then. For just at an odd time. Because you need to practice doing this with people you trust your children. Because it's people you trust who abuse children. They will have, they will have built that relationship and won't think that you would dare come up unannounced. So be sure, just pop in unannounced so that they don't know when you're coming. Just practice that kind of thing. Now, which of these people do you think might be a groomer or dragon? I think you're going to have to hit about 10 times now. What would you like?
All of them.
See all those little dragons?
Oh, I can barely see them.
Oh, I see.
Well, you see, there's a reason you can barely see them.
Um,
Yeah, you can go ahead and stop because I don't know how many whoops go
were
out.
they all?
Yeah. All of them. And I will tell you right now, we have had more than one pastor. We have had 2 doctors, a judge. That's a coach. I don't remember a coach, but I'm sure there has been one sometime. Women, of course. Yeah, I mean, these are just normal people. Normal looking people. People who are in power, too. Yeah, the doctor was a surgeon, actually.
Clergy collar.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I had, in fact, the first person I ever worked with who had been sexually abused. This was not a child, she was an adult who had been sexually abused as a child. And the perpetrator was a pastor. And I went with her to confront him. And we actually, he was charged. And, yeah. And man, you talk about the excuses. Whoa, and that's what they'll do too. They'll make you think you're crazy. They'll make the victim think they're crazy. You know, oh, well, that was just a mistake. That was just this. That was just that. You misread that. You know, yeah. I mean, it's all about, they're totally self-centered. And everything is about them. And they never take responsibility. It's almost like they believe that, you know, they're untouchable. And for the most part, because they get by with it, they pretty much, once they've gotten by with it one time, they can get by with it again and again and again, and it's permission, you know? So, yeah, all these people, any of those people can be, and I've seen many of those people be the offenders.
Is it true that some perpetrators have been sexually abused themselves?
Yes, and a lot of people think, mistakenly, that if you're abused, you're going to go on to abuse. And that's not the case. People who are sexually abused, most sexual abusers who are like addiction sexual abusers, like who have like 100 or so victims in their lifetime, those sexual offenders typically were severely physically abused as children. It's a small percentage of, I mean, less than 15% of those who are sexually abused who go on in their adulthood to offend. Yeah. Okay. I think this was actually the last thing I had up here. If a child ever discloses to you, the first thing you really want to do is listen. You know, you don't want to react, because I'll never forget, this was a long time ago when this commercial, maybe y'all will remember it, it was a orange juice commercial. And there's a little girl and a little boy sitting on steps on the front porch. And he had a straw in his orange juice. And when he did this, the sun came up higher in the sky. And then when you let it go, the sun went down lower. So that was really a perfect illustration of how kids think that everything that happens around them in the world is because of them. I mean, the world revolves around them, and it's supposed to. That's part of development. That's their development, you know? So the world is supposed to revolve around children as they're growing. So that calmness is really, really important, because a kid is watching for your reaction. And if you cry, they're going to shut down, because they think it's their fault. If you get angry, red-faced angry, they're going to shut down. It's their fault. And they think they're in trouble. So you have to, and it's hard to stay, you know, level, but you just kind of have to stay level. And just listen to everything they say without asking a bunch of questions. You don't further ask a bunch of questions, because that can interfere later with a forensic interview and a legal case. Assure them, I believe you. I believe what you're telling me. Because that's what they're testing. They're testing to see, do you believe me? Will you believe me? Because the perpetrator is probably saying, nobody's going to believe me. Nobody's gonna believe you. And for them to have the courage to overcome that and to say to you what's happened to them. And when you say, I believe you, you might get probably even more than they were testing you with. And you might get more. So be prepared for that. Make sure, now they're never gonna believe this, but make sure you say, what happened to you, this was not your fault. They will not believe you. I promise. Because remember, they think that everything going on in the world around them is their fault. And they have been told that it was their fault. You know, I couldn't resist. I couldn't help myself. All that. So they believe it was their fault. But tell them that. Thank them for having the courage. Thank them for telling you. Finally, do not promise this will never happen to you again. Please don't say that. You can't make that promise. You don't know that. Don't make promises you can't keep. Just make sure that you say, we're going to get you help. I'm going to go to get help. But not so this never happens again. And then you report. You report big time.
I was gonna ask you that
Yes.
about, in any context that we work, even as a volunteer, aren't we mandated to
You are
report?
mandated in the state of North Carolina. I don't care if you work, if you're a bum on the side of the road, you are a mandated reporter if you suspect. If you suspect, period. You don't have to go out and do your investigation. That's our job. You know. So yeah, you have to report. And I suggest reporting both to. I mean, hospitals have to report to both DSS and law enforcement, and I encourage reporting to both. Law enforcement may not be involved, but they're a part of that MDT. So if a stitch gets dropped, I would be reporting to both of those. Yeah, Tom.
Is Child Protective Services the place to start, calling them?
Yes, DSS. That's what I was saying. Yeah, you call DSS, and I would say law enforcement too. Now, DSS typically is frontline. You call them first. If it's not a family member, then they're going to screen it out and call law enforcement. But the reason I say make sure you call law enforcement too is because there are some counties in which they should be calling law enforcement and referring over, and they're not. So call both. Now that doesn't happen in this county, but yeah.
So would you call the sheriff when you're
Yeah.
talking about law enforcement?
Yeah, here it would be the sheriff's department.
That'd be through Central Communications
Yeah,
instead of 911.
right.
This applies to suspected neglect. too.
Absolutely.
Not
Absolutely.
just abuse, but
Right.
neglect.
Right. And we serve children who have been severely neglected, who have been physically abused and sexually abused. Majority of the children we see have been sexually abused. And the physical abuse that we see, actually since COVID, has been more severe. Go figure. But it has been. So yeah, we serve that whole realm. So any abuse that you suspect, abuse and or neglect, you report. And you can do so, if it's a neighbor or if it's somebody that you don't want to tell them who you are that you're reporting. Report anonymously. You can report anonymously. And you can request that they let you know the outcome of that report. Was it screened in? Was it screened out? And on the part of Kids First, if something gets screened out, and yet the suspicion is still really high, we've been known to go ahead and do a forensic interview anyway. Just because, it just keeps getting called in and keeps getting called in, and somehow it's missing that line. And we've opened some cases that way. So, but we are not the reporting agency. You know, Child Protective Services is. Yeah. Questions?
What's a forensic interview?
A forensic interview is a legally defensible, fact-finding interview. And our forensic interviews are trained in 3 models. So what that is, instead of a child having to go to, you know, tell 9 different people, like, you know, here's the teacher, and then there's the not superintendent, but then there's a counselor, then there's a vice principal, then there's a principal. Instead of them having to go through all that, we get the referral, and in a forensic interview room, there's a camera, and the kid knows that. There's a camera, there's a mic, and they know they're being recorded, and they know that other people are in another room watching through closed circuit. So the forensic interview is forensic, meaning fact-finding interview. It's legally defensible because it is non-leading, and that's why I said, don't ask the child a lot of questions. Only questions you might ask a child would be, who did this? Where were you? When did it happen? That's it. And never, ever, ever ask. It may be the child tells you that something happened last month or last year. Please, 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 never ask a child, why didn't you tell me before? Mm-hmm. That puts the blame right on that child.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, big time. They already feel that way. And they've waited that long because they didn't know if they'd be believed in the first place. So don't go blaming them. You know, so don't say, why didn't you, or why didn't you run, or why didn't you do this, or what? No. Thank you for telling me you did the right thing. And I understand why you waited. If they, you know, yeah. Yes.
I read 2 articles today in today's Daily Advance about child abuse. And the main subject was, I think, there's a law that is pending, parental rights. And with the removal of books in school libraries, and they said children do not, because of all of this, children do not learn from authorities about sexual abuse.
Because of the books? Because of the lack of books?
And you know, like they don't learn about healthy sex. Maybe is what they were saying. In schools, and by not being able to learn about sexual abuse.
Right. Well, and here's the thing.
Well, there are a lot of books out there that
discuss these
things.
Hypocritical kind of thing that happens in some school systems. They don't want you teaching anything about sex education in schools.
Right.
Well, come on.
Right.
Where do you want them learning?
And of all the things they say, one book that had requests to be removed is by is it Toni Morrison? Blues.
Yeah. And that's part of all this stripping the libraries.
There's another book that says not all boys are blue, you know. So, but I thought it was interesting that if all of this is removed, kids don't have any way to learn about this.
Right. Yeah.
They learn on their phones.
Yeah, they learn too much on their phone.
They learn the wrong thing on the internet.
Yeah, where everything is out there. It shouldn't necessarily.
There is the best, there are apps for phones for kids. One is Life 360, and another is Kid Logger. And Life 360, there's actually a call mama, I need help, call daddy, I need a panic button in Kid Logger. In Life 360. But I tell you what, the best thing, and this is for, if you just Google Net Smarts, you'll come across this. This is with the Center for Missing and Exploited Children. And at missingkids.org, NetSmarts has all kinds of videos, cartoons and stuff, and then guidelines for going along with the kids and questions and stuff. I mean, it's like age 3 to 5, 6 to 9, 10 to 13, 13 to 18. I mean, it's wonderful. Wonderful. It had games and videos and all kinds of stuff on safety, teaching on safety. I've been using that class rooms. I mean, it really, really is good stuff. And of course, on any platform, you don't want it allowing direct messaging. You don't want it allowing anonymous users. You don't allow for photos or videos to be shared because that's all over the place. Doesn't have location services. You have to check these things. But NetSmarts will tell you that that site has more resources than any place I know. I mean, it is phenomenal. More than I could ever give it.
On a little bit lighter note,
Yeah.
tell us what Lincoln does.
Oh, Lincoln is wonderful. He wore blue on Wear Blue Day. I should have brought him, I guess, but he'd have eaten all y'all's spaghetti.
Yeah, you would.
He's right there at table height, and
Yeah.
believe you me, he does not ask permission
No.
when it comes to food. No. In fact, I'll tell you this. Denise, who is our office manager and Hub of the Wheel event planner, she does a little of everything. The first day she worked, we stole her lunch. I mean, the whole thing, gone. Yeah, and he's stolen it since then. But I was like, hey, you.
Who Lincoln is, because not everybody
Right,
knows.
okay, Lincoln, he's not a child. Lincoln is the Labradoodle. Some of you have seen him in here, or you've seen him. He has his own Facebook page, Lincoln Morris, so feel free to follow him. But he just turned 7 years old, and he's the facility dog at Kids First. So by now, he's seen at least probably 12 to 1,400 kids so far in his 7 years. And he goes out into the weight room and greets the kids, and he's amazing, y'all. He'll go and if there are 4 kids and 2 adults, if that adult is the one who is the most uptight, he's going to plop himself right beside that adult. And then a kid may call him over or something, and he'll go, both of them, and bam, right back to that. Whoever needs it, he knows. And I always leave the door open that leads back to my office. And after he's done, I mean, because, dogs don't have a barrier, a psychic kind of barrier like we do to protect ourselves. He'll look at me and look at the door and head to the door with his head. And I'm like, okay, y'all, Lincoln's done. And he's done. And I have to go take him for a walk or something to get that energy out of him. And then he'll come back in and bam, he's out. But he sees a lot of kids, and he is amazing. And I've had many parents, and I'll ask, how does he do this? Does he know who needs it? I said, yeah. He was born for this work. He was born for it. He's an amazing dog. And I'm blessed to have him, privileged to have him. And he puts up with me. But he gets a whole lot of lamb lung, so that's puppy crack. So he gets that, yeah. But he's a great puppy dog.
Was he trained?
Oh yeah.
Trained for this?
Oh yes. Yeah.
You mentioned Hopeline earlier.
Yes.
They serve the same counties that you serve.
6. They serve 6 counties, and I serve 7.
You have 7, okay.
Yeah.
At one time, I understand that Hopeline, the largest percentage of their clients was from Currituck. What percentage would you say the county is that you serve for Kids First?
It's the same as Pasquotank. Pasquotank and Currituck, actually year to year, they're neck and neck. It's about the same for Hopeline.
Yeah.
They just run neck and neck. But yet Pasquotank has a bigger population. In the mainland, Currituck And, you know, so it's kind of odd that we really do have.
Are some of your kids referred to you from Hope Line?
Oh, certainly,
Yeah.
yeah. And what we'll do is, if those children were exposed to domestic violence, then the parents are getting referred, we work like this
Yeah.
together. Oh, yeah, yeah. So we serve the children that come from Hope Line, and then Hope Line, a lot of times, we refer the parents,
Right.
the adults to them. Yeah.
What percent of the perpetrators are caught in this process?
Very few. Not a lot. Not a lot. Because most of them are, well, of those where children disclose, then those, you know, that's 10% or a little less than 10%. So those perpetrators, for the most part, where children disclose to us, they do get caught. Now, do they get prosecuted? Most of them do not go to trial, and there's a reason for that. If you have a 5-year-old child, a 4-year-old child, they're going to have to testify. They're going to have to be on the stand in front of that jury and in front of the perpetrator. So in many cases, what happens is they will take a plea so that the child does not have to testify. And that, you know, that's a decision of the district attorney's office and sometimes the family. So, but they're on the sex offender registry. And finally, the registry is universal. So they can't jump county to county or state to state and it not be known that they were on the registry in North Carolina or in Currituck County. You know, and you can find them. And if you look at the registry and look at the map of where perpetrators are, look around the schools and parks and churches, there they are. Just outside the boundaries where they're not supposed to be. Yeah. Yep.
How about your funding?
Oh, honey. Okay, so funding for Kids First, for the most part, we have always had, our majority of our funding has come through what's called the Victims of Crimes Act. And that came into play in the 80s under Ronald Reagan, actually. And that is a crime victim criminal fees, okay, perpetrator fees. And mainly it's white collar crime, because you know, they've got the big bucks that they have to pay out for white collar crime, whether it's bank fraud, whatever. You know, millions upon millions of dollars going into that Victims of Crimes Act fund. And so what happens with that fund, because it's not taxpayer dollars, those monies then get sent out to the states in a percentage basis, and then the states, through the Governor's Crime Commission, they dole it out to victim service agencies, one of which is Kids First, another of which is Hope Line. 4 years ago, we took a 64% cut in that huge, huge pot of money. At that time, I had 3 VOCA grants. This coming year, they're talking about it being a 97% cut of that remaining, of that 64% they took out, which left, what, 36%? So 97% of that is not going to leave a lot in the pot.
Is that
So,
federal funding or state funding?
no, that's federal that then comes to the state, and the state.
So the cuts were at the federal level or the state level?
I'm sorry?
The cuts were at the federal level or the state level?
It comes to the federal level. VOCA is a federal fund that then goes to the state.
Was it cut
through the Governor's Crime
federally?
Commission.
Was it cut federally or state?
Oh, no. It was cut federally.
Okay.
But here's what happened. So most recently, when there was the, federal grants and all that kind of stuff, it was, I'm sorry, but all that was already approved in last year's budget. But the reason for the VOCA funding depletion is because there's a lot of out-of-court settlements. There are delayed prosecutions. So there's not as much money going into the fund. So we now have a bill, it's in Congress, it's H.R. 909. And our DARE, I got our DARE, and I got everybody, please call our congressman in DARE and Currituck for our districts. And everybody did. And so our two congressmen from this area have co-signed onto H.R. 909. And what that is there's a whistleblower fund, and the whistleblower fund is a third of that goes to the victims, or the whistleblower. A third of it goes to fees, like attorney fees and so on. A third of it's going into a slush fund. H.R. 909 asks that for 5 years, it's called the Victim Fund Stabilization Act, that for 5 years, that third that's going into a slush fund come into VOCA to help stabilize the VOCA fund and get it running again. So that's, fingers crossed, that will come into play. Meanwhile, other funding that we have, I have state funding that comes through our state. I have funding that comes from foundations. Centera, thankfully, Centera helped make up some of that lost VOCA funding. There are foundations like the Canberra Foundation. There are just lots of little grants, little foundation grants, big foundation grants. So I write grants all the time. Yeah, and then donate. But see, here's the thing. It's always been very difficult for us to raise local funds because people don't believe this happens here. People don't know what Kids First is. And so it's just very difficult it has been over time.
Do you get any support from the counties?
Yes, I get some, but see, here's the thing. When you're providing the level of services that we provide, there's no way that our counties can afford those services. I mean, when you're looking at Gates County, Queens County, they can't give us but so much. Pasquotank and Currituck give us the most, but we serve them the most. And we save them, okay, like Currituck County, for example, $25,000 from Currituck County. I save them over $300,000 a year. So, and this is mandated services. So the money we save every one of these counties, if it were not for Kids First, they would be shipping these kids to Greenville or UNC on their dime. And that would be for the service, and the kids wouldn't be getting treatment because there's nobody else to do it. And they wouldn't be traveling back and forth to Greenville or UNC, it wouldn't be happening. So, you know.
What's the size of your staff?
I have 9. Yeah, and then I have 2 volunteer, one physician, pediatrician who's volunteer, and then one nurse practitioner who is a volunteer. So after work at Coastal Pediatrics, they will come and do child medical evaluations for us. And then on their day off, which is just phenomenal. You know, because those child medical evaluations, by the time they do the report, they got 5 hours into it by the time they do one exam. Yeah, it's amazing. And you can go to kidsfirstinc.org and become a member and donate monthly and whatever. Where is that QR code? But anyway, and there are some brochures around here somewhere. And another thing for prevention too, body safety thing, just teaching little kids about body safety, you know. But we certainly can't expect children to protect themselves. If we suspect, we have to be looking out for really adults, you know. You just wouldn't believe all this.
What about that new hand signal?
What's the new hand signal? Maybe I don't know it.
I understood on the web you can learn about it. It's something like your
Oh, I've heard that.
Yeah.
Meeting a sign or something and then something behind.
Yeah,
Right.
like if you're in a car and you're at a stoplight and something, you wanna signal to somebody next door.
That's something, right,
Is it this?
I think so.
What is it?
Yeah.
What is
You
it?
have, you put your thumb here like she's showing it, she's showing it.
Yeah.
But you do that a couple of times, right, like that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wish somebody I'm not supposed to be with, or may even be that
Or if you're
mom
on
and
an,
dad has,
if you're on an aircraft and
yeah,
you wanna signal people across the aisle because
Yeah.
you're being held against your will,
Right.
something like that.
right. And that's come about because of the trafficking and sex trafficking and all of that. Yeah.
Do you do this, presentation before, say, 4-H volunteers?
Honey, I'll do it anywhere, anytime.
Have you had the schools, have you do it